is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. And with that, let's bring up our next presenter, Ken Marish of Synaptica. Ken, if you want to go ahead and launch your slides and kick off when ready.
All right, great. Thank you so much for giving me the time to share with you this amazing breakthrough in Alzheimer's. So we have a personalized take on an existing stimulation technology. It is TMS technology, which has now been paired with EEG. And I'll tell you why that's important in a minute, but the results are absolutely unprecedented. We have 2 phase 2 trials that are done now that show that our therapy works in slowing down the disease of Alzheimer's in every domain at 6 months and at 12 months. These are published, randomized, peer-reviewed data. So I'll be showing that in a minute, but that's the high level. And all of us know somebody or have experienced themselves this hideous disease. It engulfs the lives of families in a way no other disease does. You think about terminal illnesses like cancer have a 70% mortality rate. Alzheimer's is 100% mortality rate. It is a death sentence, and it is not an easy death. It's 5 to 7 years of a slow motion train wreck, which I saw with my own grandmother and my grandfather. But isn't it a graveyard of failures, you might say? Well, yeah, but the problem has been the industry has been obsessively focused on just one target, amyloid. We call it the usual suspect. For 20 years, we've all been focused on one target. Well, targeting amyloid is like cleaning up the ashes after the house is burned down. We need to look at other suspects. Who started the fire? We need to look upstream of amyloid. So we're focused on neurodegeneration. The synapses themselves start to misfire in Alzheimer's. And so simply put, when you electrically stimulate these neurons, they strengthen. So it's magnetically induced electrical stimulation. So that induces what we call neuroplasticity. That is the strengthening of the networks that compose the brain. And the question is, can we get enough neuroplasticity to slow down this freight train of a disease? So transcranial magnetic stimulation, some of you have heard of it. It's TMS. It's been around since 2008. It's powerful and it's painless. And it does work in depression. But until now, it's really shooting in the dark. There's no way to confirm what you're actually stimulating in the brain with TMS as it is today. Now, our patented technology combines TMS with EEG in real time. And so now we can confirm if we've hit the right target, and that changes everything. So like throwing a pebble into the pond, TMS fires at the brain, at the precuneus in our case, right here. So 3, 2, 1, bang. That's one pulse. Slowed down, obviously. You're seeing how it propagates in the brain. And that's like active sonar of the brain that allows us to confirm if we hit the right target. In our case, the target is the whole default mode network. We want to see propagation of the pulses within the entire network because that is the network where memories are formed. And that, Alzheimer's being a disease of memory, is the most affected network in the brain with Alzheimer's. So Giacomo is our professor at the University of Ferrara, and he runs the Santa Lucia Brain Stimulation Lab. It's been there since 1960. It's a 350-bed facility, a major center for Europe. And Emiliano's over at Harvard. He's a professor of neurology and psychiatry. He focuses on the data science aspects of things, and they've been collaborating on this problem for about 15 years. They're funded by all the right institutions, including by the Bill Gates-backed ADDF 5 times before. 700 peer-reviewed articles between the two of them. Absolutely outstanding, prolific experts in this field. So here are the results from our latest phase 2 clinical trial. Here's Giacomo on the stage. He's unveiling the results to the world at the largest conference in the world on Alzheimer's. And that was the audience in attendance. And you could hear a pin drop because no one has seen data like this in quite a while. So the 1-year trial was a complete success on every single measure. We significantly slowed disease progression in all 3 domains: cognition, function, and behavior. That is the trifecta. No drug has ever done that. On activities of daily living, this is a 78-point scale. The stimulated arm lost 1.5 points out of 78, so barely any loss of function. Feed yourself, dress yourself, bathe yourself. That's the kind of function we're talking about. And unfortunately, the placebo lost about 10% of their function. So anyway, strong results. We really stabilized the disease in terms of function. Have not seen data like this in 20 years, maybe since Aricept. So the worst thing, well, actually, let me take a step back. So you might ask, well, are you actually stimulating the brain and giving patients a little temporary bump, or are you literally changing the brain? We are changing the brain. So this is outside independent work done by a third party, Oxford Brain Diagnostics, where they did the fMRI and the MRI data on our patients. And what they found was new connections in the brain. That's the colored piece that you see here, are formed, especially where we stimulate. So we are literally creating new connections in the brain. We're preserving the microstructure of the brain, and we're even preserving gray matter volume as measured by structural MRI, voxel-based morphometry. This is the worst that could happen to you with our therapy. You could get a mild headache in 1 out of 10 patients, a small price to pay for preserving everything that it means to be human. We got FGE breakthrough designation. We're published in major peer-reviewed journals. The Oxford Journal Brain has been around for only 140 years, and we're getting great press now in Newsweek and NBC and Stat News, really talking about this major breakthrough. The ADDF approached us. That's where Bill Gates puts his money. His father died of Alzheimer's. Jeff Bezos also puts his money there to support Alzheimer's research. And the Lauder family, that's Gary Lauder. Estee Lauder died of Alzheimer's. And so the ADDF was established in her name. So they are a huge foundation, and they came to us wanting to fund our next trial. We're also being highlighted by RBC, great bank, huge bank. Why us? Well, because they see a huge IPO potential in the future for something like an Alzheimer's breakthrough like this. So every patient has to get calibrated to ensure we're stimulating the right spot on the brain. Every patient responds differently. They don't feel a thing. All they need is a simple finger prick blood test and an MRI. And this system actually exists. This is not a mock-up. It's already approved in depression. We've simply repurposed it and added personalization with EEG and connected it to the internet. The first clinical unit ships in April. So just want to emphasize personalization and precision are critical, and we own the FTO, the freedom to operate worldwide. Our patents are granted, and they cover the method of using TMS with EEG to personalize in any brain disease. We also got our reimbursement codes, so we're well on the path to having Medicare pay for this, up to $22,000 per patient per year. $22,000 per patient really adds up in a disease state with 6 million patients. So we make money by selling the entire system, and we charge per use. About $290,000 that goes to Synaptica from just 40 patients. Of course, there are 4.8 million patients on label. That's just from 40 patients. And neurologists have a huge new profit center here with this therapy, 366 per week. And then each patient gets 50 treatments per week. That's 730,000 to the neurologist. Now they have to pay us, they have to hire a technician, they have to buy the machine, but the net to the neurologist, this thing pays for itself. Almost 400,000 per system per year in profit from just 40 patients. And some of these neurologists have hundreds of patients. And remember, they don't make any money on the drugs. Here, they're making a ton of money on a therapy that actually works with almost no side effects. So we have a thoughtful go-to-market plan that puts us on a conservative pathway to 900 million in sales by year 7. I'm not showing you some crazy hockey stick to the moon. This is a very defensible model. 700 million of that has drug-like margins, over 90%, because it's the per-click fee. So incredibly lucrative economics. Now, in the hands of Boston Scientific, they could run this to 2.2 billion in just the US. How do I know? Well, I was the head of strategy for Boston Scientific's billion-dollar neuromodulation division for nearly a decade. That's the very division that would acquire us. I also ran the Cosman franchise, so I've sold capital equipment in 40 countries worldwide. Rich McCary comes from Wall Street. We've got people who've actually built a system from scratch. Lisa's run a phase 3 in Alzheimer's before. Anyway, great team, great scientific advisory board. These are some of the biggest names in all of Alzheimer's. They agree this could be a huge breakthrough. Commercial advisors who have built the market for TMS for depression. So this convertible note is rolling. Got a little bit left. It funds an early AD study, which is already enrolling patients. We got about 7 patients in now. If we're successful in earlier AD, so the very beginning stages of Alzheimer's, we could double our LTV per patient because they'd be on the therapy twice as long, give them twice as much life if we work just as well in early AD. Now, the convertible note, which is open, rolls into the Series A, which we're also in parallel discussing with multiple VCs. That funds the pivotal study, which is up to 15 sites. That could put us on the market by 2029, which is not that far away. However, recent conversations with the FDA could easily get us approval by 2028. Wow, that is just around the corner. Think about what that would mean. A safe, effective therapy like this on the market in just 3 years. So, and when we hit the market, Boston Scientific could swoop in and buy us, or Medtronic. These are the deals they did in just neuromodulation, just neuromodulation. So Abbott could buy us. Those are neuromod deals. LivaNova we're talking to. Philips would be good. GE would be perfect. Their CFO hired me at Baxter years ago. Or if we don't get acquired, we'll IPO. Novocure went public for 1.8 billion. Novocure, if you're not familiar, makes a glioblastoma neuromodulation device that slows down glioblastoma, which is 100% fatal brain disease. Sound familiar? It's a fatal brain disease. Well, Alzheimer's is 400 times bigger, 400 times bigger than glioblastoma, and their device went public for 1.8 billion. So with this comp, these kind of comps, it's hard not to see enormous returns. So the $9 million note has about 2,600,000 left for 10 Capital and other angels. We have about 40 investors into the note, including Time Zero Capital. Sony is also a big backer. This note has a 55 million val cap and a 20% discount. This is not your typical angel investment. We are much further along and de-risked versus other angel deals. And now for the first time, and I hate to say we're closing in on this date, but by March 31st, we are going to lower the val cap till March 31st from 55 to 40, just till March 31st. So if you put up your hand and you sign, we can get you in for 40 million val cap, but then my board is authorized only till March 31st. It comes back up to 55, unfortunately. So if you like a piece of Synaptica at that lower val cap and you put up your hand to get a commitment, we can get you in for 40. So in summary, look, this is a huge breakthrough in a holy grail of medicine. Phenomenal results from 2 phase 2 studies, a patented moneymaker for neurologists with recurring revenue margins north of 90%, could be on the market by 28. We may even be able to offer this to certain VIP patients earlier under the right clinical trial conditions. This is precision medicine at the connectome level. If you're interested in being a part of this blue ocean CNS approval, this breakthrough, I would love to have more people aboard.
Great presentation, Ken. Brian, what's your first question?
Tremendous detail there. So I'm very pleased to hear all of that. Your 2022 FDA breakthrough designation, was that granted specifically on the Alzheimer's treatment path, or was that for the alternative treatments on depression or some other type of approach?
The language for the indication was very carefully worded. It was for the treatment of Alzheimer's, full stop. Now, you'd think that they would narrow it down to just mild to moderate Alzheimer's because that's what we showed, but nope. It was for the treatment of Alzheimer's, full stop. So it's a broad indication for just Alzheimer's.
Okay. And then you guys obviously, in the middle of phase 2, interesting to me, there's the US market FDA play, and then there's the international market. You mentioned an early stage process going on in Italy. Are you concomitantly chasing opportunities in Europe and other emerging markets, or are you going FDA first with that? What's your go-to-market worldwide strategy?
Everyone tells us, and I agree, and I was at Boston, we got to go after the US first. It's the biggest market, and the reimbursement, as you just heard, is tremendous. 22,000 per patient. Most of the European countries could not support that. So even if we did launch, it wouldn't hit 22,000. It might be half of that and take twice as long, and it's a smaller market. So we're doing this study because it's cheap and easy to run in Italy, honestly. Totally frank with you. It's super easy to run these studies. And if we're successful, it's just going to help with the evidence in the US. We will eventually hit the European market, but I got to do one thing at a time.
Got it. And I forget where you're at in your phase 2, but you're already down the road. I'm just curious, your 6-month data you'll have well before 27, right?
So the 6-month phase 2 in mild to moderate was done a long time ago. The 12-month phase 2 in mild to moderate was also done a while ago. So this would be a third phase 2. Now you might say, well, why are you doing another phase 2? Well, it's because we want the additional evidence that shows it works in earlier disease. That's all. But this pivotal, if that's your question, this pivotal will be in mild to moderate because that's where the vast majority of our data is. And those are desperate patients with no options. The drugs are not approved for moderate. They don't work in moderate. So these patients have nothing. They've been handed a death sentence. They have nothing. So we got to go after mild to moderate first.
Got it. Of the 9, 6.8's already been raised. Is any of that from the large institutions or the foundations that you mentioned? Or are they in the CD round in this play?
Yeah. So a big piece of this is 3.6 million that we're setting aside for ADDF. So we're in process on that. We passed their scientific evaluation. They know our professors really well. In fact, they're quoted in our press release. So they're very close to us. So 3.6 million is allocated to the ADDF, and that's the biggest chunk of that.
Great.
Yeah. A lot of great CEOs are on board, a lot of MDs, Asymmetry Ventures, Health Tech Capital, obviously Time Zero Capital. Who else? Yeah. about 45 investors.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
Going fast.
So, question from the audience: how is AI being used here?
Okay, so many companies say, we're AI this, we're AI that. We actually used machine learning to develop these algorithms. It's published. We used a random forest model for a classification of Alzheimer's patients. We can put it in the chat. But yes, this data is so complex, you must use machine learning to make sense of it because, standard correlations and algorithms are not enough to process this data. So we use machine learning not to do the therapy, but to develop the algorithms because most people don't know this, but the FDA will not accept machine learning approaches that do it on the fly. They want to see the exact algorithms you're using because they don't want it to ever change, obviously, right? It's a product that could really hurt you if it changes too much. So the FDA says, tell us your algorithms. And if it's machine learning that you can't explain, you're really stuck. So we use machine learning to develop the algorithms. In our case, it's a 7-step process to clean the data, process the data, do the feature extraction, personalize the therapy, send the coordinates back to the machine, and so we can explain it. But yes, as we go forward, we're going to continue to use machine learning to refine and optimize the therapy. Absolutely. We are sitting on a gold mine of data from every patient we stimulate.
We're at the end of our time. Great presentation. And with that, we'll see you in the breakout rooms in a moment. And before that, we have one more, Nathan Monti of EnamelPure. Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.